You just prayed, and still, you feel empty. You just finished your prayer, and yet, you feel nothing. You bored. You cried inside. You whispered, Ya Allah, from a place deep within you. But there's no warmth, no rush of peace. Just silence. Your heart is quiet. Not in a serene way, but in an empty way. It's like walking through fog at night. You know where the Qibla is. You know the words. But it's like the connection is just out of reach. You start wondering, is something wrong with me? Why am I doing everything right and still feeling so far from Him? But let me tell you this, not as a scholar, not as someone above you, but as someone walking the same path. You're not alone. You're not the only one who's felt this. And no, you're not broken. You are not broken. You're just being refined. We have this idea that feeling distant means you've done something wrong. That your lack of emotion is a sign of spiritual failure. But that's not true. Do you think Noah didn't feel alone when people rejected him for 950 years? Do you think Maryam didn't feel the weight of silence when she hid under a tree, giving birth without a soul to comfort her? Even the Prophet Muhammad, the most beloved to Allah, felt the weight of emotional distance in moments. There was a time revelation paused, and he feared he'd been abandoned. So no, you're not broken. You're not abandoned. You're being softened, shaped, refined. Because gold doesn't melt in cool air, it takes fire. And only those with value get tested this way. Fog doesn't mean you're off the path. It's okay if you don't feel spiritual right now. It's okay if your mind wandered during salah. It's okay if your heart feels quiet when it used to feel alive. That doesn't mean you failed. That doesn't mean you're lost. You're in fog. And fog doesn't erase the road, it just hides it for a little while. The heart has weather. Some days it's bright and clear. Some days it storms. Some days it just drifts. But Allah, He doesn't drift. He doesn't move. He's still where He always was, closer to you than your own jugular vein. So even if your hands feel cold when raised in dua, raise them anyway. Even if your prayer feels empty, stand anyway. Because fog passes. And when it does, the road is still there, and so is your Lord. Allah hasn't moved. He still sees you. You feel like no one sees you. Like your tears are going into the void. But the truth is, Allah sees every single drop. He sees the prayer you whispered with a shaking voice. He sees the time you said, Alhamdulillah, through gritted teeth. He sees the night you made sujood, not because you felt it, but because you didn't know what else to do. Allah doesn't need your perfection. He wants your persistence. The Quran doesn't say He loves the perfect. It says He loves those who keep returning. So return. Again and again. Even if all you can say is, Ya Allah, I don't feel you right now, but I still believe you're near. Because He is. And He never moved. Sometimes the silence is the answer. We think if Allah isn't speaking, He isn't listening. But maybe the silence is the response. Maybe it's how your story needs to unfold. Remember Taif? The Prophet was rejected, insulted, bleeding, and he raised his hands and made dua. And Allah? He sent no angel, no thunder, no instant relief. Just silence. But in that silence, Islam was being planted. And years later, that silence gave birth to victories that shook the world. Not all answers come in sound. Some come in what he delays, some in what he removes, and some in silence that echoes through the years. You don't need to feel it to believe it. We've been taught that Iman should feel electric, that when we stand for prayer, our hearts should tremble. But here's a truth most won't say out loud. Real faith isn't felt. It's chosen. It's not the chill in your spine when you hear Quran. It's not the rush of tears when you make dua. Those are gifts, but they're not faith. Faith is what remains when the gifts are gone. Faith is standing up for Fajr even when your eyes burn. Faith is saying Astaghfirullah even when your nafs screams for comfort. Faith is believing even when you don't feel anything at all. Because you're not here to chase feelings. You're here to chase Ana. Faith is not a feeling. It's a decision. You know what's harder than crying in sujood? Praying when your heart feels numb. You know what's braver than shouting Allahu Akbar with joy? Whispering it when you're full of doubt. That's the test. That's the reality of spiritual endurance. We think the most powerful sujood is the one soaked in tears. But sometimes the most powerful sujood is when you bow your head with a dry heart and do it anyway. Because that sujood says, even when I don't feel it, I choose you. And that choice, that's where transformation begins. Even your silence is written down. The angels don't just write what you say. They write what you wanted to say, but couldn't. They write the nights you stared at the ceiling, unable to speak. The moments you raised your hands, then lowered them in shame. The times your eyes filled with tears, but your lips couldn't form words. They write those too. Because Allah knows the language of silence. He hears the prayers in your chest. He knows the meaning behind your sigh. So don't think your silence is failure. It's faith, quiet, tired, but still alive. Maybe your closed door saved your soul. You asked for something. You begged. You pleaded. You thought, this is it. This is what I need. And then the door slammed shut. And you broke. But what if that closed door wasn't rejection? What if it was protection? Maybe Allah saw something you didn't. Maybe what you were asking for would have pulled you farther from Him. Maybe it would have hardened your heart. Maybe it would have delayed your growth. You didn't fail. That door didn't lead to your future. It was blocking your ruin. You're not being denied. You're being rerouted. What if you're not lost at all? You feel lost. But what if you're exactly where you need to be? What if this moment, this silence, this confusion isn't distance but training? What if Allah wants you to meet yourself here? Without noise, without comfort, without feeling. Just you and Him. Sometimes Allah removes everything. So you'll finally speak directly to Him. Not through emotion, not through blessing, but through truth. If you're watching this now, maybe it's your sign. You're not lost. You're being drawn in.
You're closer than you think. The enemy always attacks the hardest, right before the breakthrough. And Shaitan? He wants you to believe that your silence means failure, that your numbness means distance, that your dry heart means you're done. But you're not done. You're closer than you've ever been. Because this pain, this fight, it's not punishment. It's preparation. This is where hearts become warriors. This is where the weak give up, but the patient rise. And you're still here. That means something.
Growth begins where no one sees it. A seed grows where? Underground. In darkness. In silence. There's no applause. No spotlight. Just roots. And time. And pressure. And you? You're growing too. You may feel buried right now. But you're not buried. You're planted. The pain you feel, it's loosening your soil. The silence, it's pressing your roots deeper. The stillness, it's forcing your soul to reach for the light. Don't despise this stage. This is where life begins. When you trust, even the fog obeys. You can't see the outcome. You don't know how long this silence will last. But you take a step anyway. That's trust. Tawakkul isn't saying, I know what's coming. It's saying, even if I don't, I'll move anyway. And when you do that, when you walk in the fog, the path starts to clear. Because the fog isn't meant to stop you. It's meant to see if you'll walk anyway. And when you trust, even the fog listens. He holds every tear, even the invisible ones. You've cried tears no one saw. Tears that slipped into your pillow at night. Tears that didn't even fall, but just stayed in your chest like weight. And he knows. He holds those too. You've walked into salah with heartbreak. You've whispered Alhamdulillah through grief. You've sat in silence when you couldn't even form a dua. And he recorded every second of it. So don't think your faith is weak. This is what faith looks like. It's not clean. It's not pretty. It's not always loud. But it's real. And he sees it all. Even in silence, he is responding. You may not hear him. You may not feel him. But he is responding. In the things you don't notice. In the things he's removed. In the people he distanced. In the peace he's building, quietly, patiently, inside of you. Silence isn't the end of the story. It's the part where the author is still writing. So hold on. Whisper his name. And keep walking forward. Because even when you feel lost, Allah knows exactly where you are.